Do you need garden planting inspiration for July? Well, I've got you covered because in this video, I'm sharing the best vegetables, herbs, and flowers that you can plant right now, no matter your climate. We'll go through ideas for temperate regions, tropical zones, and some unique crops from around the world that'll bring variety to your garden and plate. Check the description below for timestamps to take you to the portion of the video that applies best to your gardening climate and to get a free printable checklist of all the crops to plant in July. All right, let's get into it. I'm starting with cold climate temperate gardens first. If you're a hot climate gardener, then skip to this part of the video. You are what I call a cold climate gardener if your summer days on average don't go above about 90 degrees Fahrenheit. You have defined seasons with snow and hard freezes during the winter. Right now, the concern is what can you plant now to harvest before your first winter frost arrives? In order for these planting options to work for you, you must know your first average winter frost date. If you have 3 months left before your first winter frost date, you can direct sow seeds for bush and pole beans right now in July. I highly recommend you choose early maturing varieties to ensure you harvest before first frost arrives. One of my personal favorites is a bush bean variety called Provider because it's one of the earliest producing that I've ever grown. You will definitely get 1 or 2 flushes of harvestable green beans before frost arrives if you grow this one. If you have about 3 to 4 months before your first winter frost date, you can direct sow seeds for root crops like beets, turnips, parsnips, radish, and carrots. Amend the soil with some sort of fertilizer higher in phosphorus and potassium to support fast root development before direct sowing the seeds. July is a good time for temperate climates to direct sow or transplant cool season leafy greens like kale, collard greens, mustards, Swiss chard, and lettuce. Plant these crops now so they get a little established before your first cold fronts arrive in fall. When growing something to eat its leafy greens, it basically just needs nitrogen because this is the nutrient responsible for lush leafy green growth. So I amend the soil with blood meal, which is an organic source of nitrogen, or add some into the planting hole if you're using transplants. If you are 3 months away from your first winter frost, you can also direct sow seeds or transplant some of the bigger brassica crops like broccoli, cauliflower, cabbage, and Brussels sprouts. I like to plant them about 18 inches apart because these plants do get very big, and I find their growth gets stunted if they are overcrowded. Temperate areas with 4 months left before your first winter frost can direct sow or transplant quick to mature cucurbits right now in July. But cultivar selection is going to be super important to ensure you get a harvest before your first winter frost date. Choose varieties that mature in under 60 days. So for a squash, choose early maturing summer squash varieties like gray zucchini or early white patty pan squash. When it comes to cucumbers, choose the smaller size types like the little pickling cucumbers because these will mature faster than full-sized cucumbers. The same goes for melons. Choose the personal size or small varieties because they will also produce way earlier than their full-size counterparts. Lastly, July is a great time to transplant herbs, all sorts of herbs really, but I recommend you plant them in containers or grow bags so you can move them indoors once the cold fronts start to arrive. Or at the very least, you can move them all together so it's easier for you to throw some frost protection covers over them. Most herbs are perennial as long as something like the cold or a pest doesn't kill them. So if you can keep them alive through the winter, they will continue growing for you next year. I would use transplants right now so that way you can begin harvesting sooner rather than later. I find that herbs are kind of slow growing at first from seed, and at around the 3 to 4 month mark is when they really start gaining size so that you can harvest frequently from them. By then it's going to be too cold, so that's why I say use transplants over seeds if you're going to be planting herbs right now in July. By the way, if you're new here, welcome. My name is Jara and this is Teddy. I'm a lifelong gardener and I own a seed and plant nursery. I love to share my knowledge and help others be successful gardening and growing food. You can check out my website for unique seeds, starter plants, and free garden resources to help you grow successfully no matter where you're located. Now let's discuss planting ideas for hot or tropical climates. You are what I call a hot climate gardener if you get many summer days with temperatures above 90 degrees Fahrenheit. Many of us go over 100 degrees Fahrenheit like me here in Florida. You might be located in a tropical or subtropical climate and you have mild winters, meaning areas that don't get snow, or at the very least, you don't have very severe freezes. It is difficult to grow certain vegetables right now because of the extreme heat, so here's what I recommend you plant right now in July. July is still way too hot to plant traditional green beans, so instead direct sow seeds for yard-long beans or southern peas, also called cowpeas. Yard-long beans are a near perfect substitute for regular green beans, except they have a crunchier texture, which I really enjoy in stir fries. I'll link in the description below to my yard-long bean and mushroom stir fry recipe video to give you all some ideas on what to make with them. Southern peas are best grown to shell out the peas to consume fresh or let them dry to be used as a dry storage bean. July is also the last time I recommend you hurry up and plant Puerto Rican black beans, which are grown to harvest the dried beans for storage. Puerto Rican black beans beans are a fantastic variety for growing in subtropical or tropical areas. It tolerates high humidity much better than regular black beans, produces more, and it has a much higher disease resistance. This is a daylight sensitive crop, meaning it is triggered to start flowering and producing when the daylight hours start to decrease as we approach fall. Plant some now because the bigger the vines are by the time they start flowering, the more harvest you're going to get. July is a good time to direct sow seeds or transplant okra. There are still plenty of warm months in a row that you will get a good harvest out of them. If you have 5 to 6 months left before your first winter frost, so those of you that don't really get cold until late December or January, July is pretty much your last chance to either direct sow seeds or transplant loofah and transplant sweet potato slips. I'm direct sowing seeds for loofah right now, and I usually start harvesting sponges in November, which is perfect timing to make Christmas gifts with them. July is the last time I will plant sweet potato slips so I can harvest before Thanksgiving. At that point, I take cuttings and root more slips indoors during the winter so I can replant in early spring. It is still too hot in July for hot climate gardeners to plant traditional cool season greens, but you can plant tropical leafy greens like Malabar spinach, Okinawan spinach, Siso spinach, Chaya, longevity spinach, Molokia, and Suriname spinach, just to name a few of them. These are the leafy greens that produce for me all summer long up until when things cool down in October, which is when I switch to planting cool season greens. July and August are the hottest months of the whole year, so plant tropical herbs that will thrive in these conditions. Some ideas include ginger, turmeric, Thai basil, Cuban oregano, papalo, and lemongrass. You can direct sow seeds for culantro as well. A unique thing about culantro is that it thrives with some humidity and light shade. Just keep an eye out for bolting. Once it sends up a flower stalk, the leaves can get tough, so I harvest frequently to keep the plant productive. And one last thing for my hot climate gardener friends, which is extremely important. July is when I start sowing seeds indoors to grow transplants for my fall tomatoes, peppers, onions, leeks, and eggplants. I only recommend you sow seeds for these indoors because the climate outside right now is extreme. Extreme heat will stunt their growth. Extreme diseases circulating outside will infect them, or the huge amount of pests outside during the summer will just chew them all up. I like to get a mini greenhouse from Amazon and stick it in some corner of my house to grow out my transplants. I attach some grow lights to the shelves with zip ties. My goal with the tomatoes, peppers, and eggplants is to start them from seed right now to transplant at the end of August or maybe early September, depending on how fast they grow. Onions and leeks take a very long time to grow from seed to transplant size, about 3 to 4 months. So I start growing them now in July with intent to transplant out into the garden in October or November. I have step-by-step guides on my exact method for starting these crops from seed, which I will link below in the description. Lastly, I want to inspire others to grow lesser known or unusual crops from around the world that will grow fantastic during this time of the year, because I don't know about you, but I get bored planting the same old things. So here are some of my favorites to plant this month. July's heat is ideal for planting Indian snake cucumbers, also known as cacti. This is grown and eaten a lot in India. I started growing it last year and was wowed by how productive it was even in the middle of summer. These long fruits are not true cucumbers, but their taste and texture is very similar, and it thrives in conditions that make growing traditional cucumbers just impossible. These vines need support, so I grow them vertically for straighter fruits and better airflow. One thing to watch out for is bitterness in overripe fruits. Harvest them when they're young and tender for the best flavor. Right now is a good time to plant callaloo, also called amaranth greens. This is a fast-growing plant popular in Caribbean cooking, where the tender young leaves are sautéed with garlic, onions, and peppers, or added to soups and stews. Regular callaloo is green in color, but there is a red variegated variety, which is what I most often see in Asian recipes and cooking. In general, callaloo is very heat tolerant, but grows better when given some shade during the afternoon. The plants can reach 6 feet tall, so you will harvest a lot of leafy greens from them. July is a great time for hot climate gardeners to plant bitter melon. This is a tropical vining vegetable common in Asian, Caribbean, Indian, and African cuisine. Bitter melon is often stir-fried, stuffed, or used in soups and teas. There are generally 2 types of bitter melon, one with a smooth kind of skin and the other has a very bumpy texture. It thrives in full sun and high heat, so give it a sturdy trellis to climb and keep the soil consistently moist. Once it starts producing, harvest the fruit young for the best flavor and tenderness. Bitter melon does have a bitter flavor. It's no joke. You either love it or hate it. If you have never tried it before, I encourage you to eat it at a restaurant first to see if you like it before dedicating some growing space in your garden. If you're gardening in a hot climate this July, consider planting chaya, also known as tree spinach. This is a popular leafy green in Mexico and Central America. Chaya is perennial in hot climates where it doesn't get that cold, thrives in extreme heat, full sun, and poor soil, making it a really great choice as a survival garden crop. It produces a lot of reliable food without much inputs. Chaya is toxic unless cooked. You must boil it for about 20 to 30 minutes to remove the toxins and make make it edible. Not to scare you from growing and eating it, it's very safe if properly cooked. A lot of people grow it in Florida, especially those that have more permaculture or food forest type of setups, because it's a perennial edible crop that once established becomes a nearly maintenance-free source of leafy greens year-round. Chaya is most often enjoyed in soups, sautés, or as a green side dish. Lastly, I have this very unusual looking legume crop called winged beans. July is a great time for hot climate gardeners to plant winged beans, which is a tropical vining legume known for its unique 4-angled pods. Winged beans might look intimidating, but think of them like an extra large and crispy green bean. It is very common in South Asian and Pacific countries and cuisine. Nearly every part of the plant is edible: the pods, leaves, flowers, and even tubers, and it's packed with protein and nutrients. Winged beans are daylight sensitive, meaning they don't start producing until day lengths shorten in late summer or early fall, so planting it now in July sets you up for a productive harvest later on in the season. Grow it on a strong trellis in full sun and keep the soil moist but well drained. I hope you enjoyed this inspiring list of crops that you can plant right now in July to keep your garden growing strong. If this guide helped you out, please give it a big thumbs up. That helps out my channel more than you know, and subscribe so you don't miss any of my gardening tutorials. Let me know in the comments what you're excited to plant this month. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.